Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about death. Who doesn't love a good murder? The Death in the Nile, the new murder mystery by director Kenneth Branagh, just hit theaters, so let's talk about it. So these are the sort of films that don't really get made all that often anymore, which is a shame. Good old-fashioned whodunit murder mysteries. This Death in the Nile is kind of following off the footsteps of the 2017 Murder on the Orient Express, also directed and starred in by Kenneth Branagh, based on the best-selling, kind of beloved books by Agatha Christie. And again, if you've seen the first film, The Murder on the Orient Express, you pretty much know what you're going to get with this film. It's very similar. You got a bunch of sort of recognizable actors, and they're stuck on some moving form of transportation. Someone gets a little carried away, someone dies, and it's left to Kenneth Branagh's Hercule Poirot, the world's greatest detective, to figure out who the suspect is and solve the case. And really, kind of in its simplicity, like most, murder mysteries, that's about all you have to it. It's just sort of these different characters. Part of the experience, the enjoyment of the genre, whether it's a book or a movie or a TV show, is sort of the interactive component of as you're watching. You're trying to figure out if you can solve the case before the detective did. But like I said, these movies, for whatever reason, just don't seem to get made anymore. They're not built as much on like big spectacle, and even in this movie, that you have sort of the spectacle of the Egypt and the Nile and the pyramids, but it looks very green screeny. It's you're not going to this movie to get a lot of the scenery. You kind of go to it to see this sort of throwback. A bunch of Gal Gadot is in this movie. Armie Hammer, who's resulted in this film getting postponed by a bit due to some personal controversies. He's front and center, and there's a bunch of other kind of actors, not necessarily all A-list actors, but just a lot of characters that you probably recognize from being in some other show or some other movie, and they're all sort of quirky, unique people. Kind of with any murder mystery, none of them are all that necessarily all that likable because they gotta be just bad enough to be a worthy suspect to kill someone. And it's just you sort of see their interactions as you try and kind of piece together kind of who did it. And I'll say this movie, I didn't hate it. I didn't necessarily love it. I don't know if it did a whole lot to kind of revitalize the genre again. I'm kind of surprised. I enjoyed the Orient Express as well, but kind of surprised that led to a sequel to keep doing these. I'm glad it's there, but this movie is just sort of meh. It's okay. It's entertaining. But I think it definitely kind of falls short. It doesn't do anything to kind of justify, seeing a lot more of these movies. And I would say that the pacing, it's always kind of a delicate dance for a movie or a story like this, because obviously the murder is sort of when things kick into high gear, and that's when all the excitement and suspense happens. But in order for that to kind of pay off and have any sort of meaning, you got to establish all these characters and kind of give them motives so that you have something for the detective to work with. So it takes a while for people to start dying in this movie. You have a lot of these sort of not all that likable characters that are just kind of interacting with each other on this honeymoon and on this boat going down the Nile. So this is definitely not a fast-paced movie. It feels kind of like an old-fashioned throwback. Although there is some tension. I'll get into it in the next section of the review. But there is some tension of sort of you have this old-fashioned kind of genre that isn't done much, and you have sort of this more modern sensibilities and maybe kind of some more heightened like sexuality or just some of the themes and stuff, and some of the just sort of the tone and stuff of this. You sort of have this tension that I don't know if ever really blends together all that well of kind of current day and then kind of old-fashioned. Another kind of issue I had with this film, like I said, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. It's cool to kind of get one of these movies. But I think, like I said earlier, part of the enjoyment of a murder mystery is, as the audience, being able to kind of put together the clues and figure it out. And I'll admit, I am generally quite stupid when it comes to these sort of things. I never see, twists or, surprise endings and stuff. I never see those coming. And this is when I actually guessed the suspect who did the murder. But I don't know if, as sort of the climactic ending when Poirot is explaining all that, how he reached his conclusion. it's sort of one of those mysteries that they have information that the audience doesn't have, where there is no way that anyone could, even if they have a hunch, that anyone could, piece it together. Maybe on a second viewing, I would be able to pick up more stuff. But it kind of ends up being somewhat unsatisfying, because you feel like, almost like you were cheated, that the detective's figuring stuff out. He has all these theories and stuff and kind of scenes and evidence that you don't really see as an audience. And I think, for a murder mystery, that's sort of one of the things that you need to have. You need to kind of let the audience in a bit. And I'm not sure that this film necessarily does that. And just as far as the actor part of, this isn't a high stakes, high octane kind of thrilling movie. You kind of go to see a bunch of characters sort of ham it up and kind of chew the scenery. Kenneth Branagh, who directs, and then he's, the lead character, Perot, rocking just a fantastic mustache, probably the best facial hair in a movie since we had Oscar Isaac and Beard and Dune. I don't know which one I prefer. They're both quite fantastic. But he's sort of a quirky, arrogant, but sort of lovable character, and he's charming. A lot of the characters themselves aren't, like I said, they're not super likable. They're all selfish and have all these ulterior motives that kind of by design make you not trust them and not like them. But all the actors, there is some fun kind of interactions. Most of it coming with kind of these more straight-laced characters playing off of Perot's quirkiness. So I think overall, this is a competently made film, that's entertaining enough, even if it's not anything that you kind of leave the theater thinking a whole lot about, or wanting to see more, the boom of murder mysteries in Hollywood. As far as this sort of content on to consider, kind of stuff on the surface, there's not a whole lot of profanity in this film. That I caught just sort of a handful of mild kind of profanities. I didn't catch the an F-bomb or anything like that. There is some kind of crude sexual innuendos, at least in one scene. But overall, this isn't a film that's just filled with profanity. Speaking of sexuality, that is sort of one of those areas that seems kind of more modern sensibilities are kind of thrust into the sort of genre and stories that wouldn't necessarily had them. This isn't a film that, there's not nudity, there's not, explicit sex scenes or anything. But there is, especially in the start, there seems like there's, and I kind of understand why they put the scene in there, but that is sort of the real central kind of dance scene. And it just seems a little over the top and jarring based on kind of what the film is. And then there's other moments where characters are talking kind of, just about having sex or being real sexual, kind of using a bunch of metaphors and stuff. Sort of real carnal, and it fits with the characters. But it just seemed like it was a little bit much. And then there's also a same-sex couple in this film, which, there's not anything that's just thrust up front and center in the movie, but it's just sort of sprinkled throughout. It seems like maybe more sexuality or thematically than you would expect in a movie like this. And then just sort of violence. Obviously, this is a movie about murder, so people die, people get killed. There's blood, and none of it ends up being gratuitous or, gory, but you see dead bodies and you kind of see the results and, the after effects of people being shot or stabbed or whatever, however they die. I don't think it's anything that is, jarring or gratuitous, but obviously going into a murder movie mystery, you expect to see just a little bit of death, and you'll find that here as well. As far as the sort of the themes and kind of stuff kind of going on beneath the surface of this, I think maybe the main kind of theme that goes throughout and kind of is explored in several different ways, and maybe it's a surprising theme for a movie about murder, is love. This movie that's sort of the through line that ties all of these characters and the story together. Is you kind of have all these kind of a wide range of different diverse characters from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different social classes, and they're all thrown on this boat together. And the film this sort of walks through and explores kind of what love is, the good and the bad, through the eyes, kind of through the lens of all these different characters, and just sort of showing the best of love, the worst of love, kind of what love can make us do, kind of the extremes we can go. And there's a couple of interesting kind of quotes and moments, just sort of these dialogues of just sort of like a selfish love and kind of exposing just sort of this kind of self-centered, kind of all about me. There's one moment where a character's talking with Perot, and they're talking about kind of love and the hurt that they've gone through, and just how in love they are, and this character says something along the lines of with a love this fierce or this true, who needs God? Kind of this idea that love is God, and for a lot of these characters, love is what drives them to commit these deeds, or to feel these jealousies, and it just sort of exposes kind of this selfish love. It also explores a bit of this sort of distorted or kind of corrupted love. There's an interesting this film actually has several kind of interesting callbacks to kind of biblical stuff or biblical themes kind of sprinkled throughout, which was surprising. There's one character that is kind of giving a bit of a rant. Obviously, she's being hurt in her past by love, and she makes kind of a speech saying, the Corinthians were wrong, and then she kind of starts quoting the love is patient, love is kind verse, but kind of saying it's the opposite. In reality, love is not patient, it's selfish, and it's hurtful, and it doesn't, it does keep record of wrongs, and it's just sort of a reflection of, hey, here's sort of this ideal picture of love, but here's sort of the reality that we're faced in. We're all selfish, and we're all hurt. And kind of, although almost all the characters in this film have sort of a negative perception of love, that kind of by the end of the film, it does end up being kind of a hopeful, through the experience of sort of this traumatic tragedies and deaths, these characters do kind of return to more of that kind of Corinthians picture of what love is, that, hey, just because we're hurt, just because there's selfish distortions of it, that doesn't mean that love isn't something that is pure and worth, kind of fighting for, pursuing. And even the kind of the way this film ends and begins, it kind of begins bizarre, and I didn't really understand how it fit into the actual movie, kind of giving the backstory, basically the origin story of his mustache, which I wanted to know, but I don't know if it necessarily fit into the movie, but kind of the way the film ends does kind of tie it together, just sort of and again, I won't spoil what that is, but just sort of thematically, kind of metaphorically, of just kind of, letting go of the hurt of love, and kind of, rather than kind of letting the hurts of love in the past sort of dictate who you are, how you live, or how you act, actually kind of being free from that and just kind of living your life. There is an interesting, obviously they don't get super preachy, Sunday morning church about love. But I think as a Christian viewer, just as any viewer, there's definitely some interesting stuff to kind of wrestle with as far as sort of what is love and how do we kind of get through the hurt to kind of pursue more of like a pure love as God intended it. So overall, I enjoyed this movie. It's maybe somewhat of a forgettable movie. It's not a movie that you necessarily want to watch again and again. I think in some of the ways it falls short of where I think a murder mystery should excel, and that's sort of giving you enough clues and stuff to be able to start really track with the detective, rather than just sort of being passive and just sort of, affirming how brilliant Perot, the detective, is and solving stuff that we could never hope to do. The acting's fine. It looks it looks nice. The sets, everything in this movie is competently kind of well crafted. I just don't know if it necessarily all comes together in something that becomes like a must watch in the theaters, or that kind of movie, or much talked about. But I do think if you're bored one night and it's dropped on some streaming platform, it's worth taking 2 hours to kind of sort of experience sort of this throwback kind of murder mystery genre that we just don't get enough of these days. But let me know if you did see it in theaters, or if you're watching this review later and you've seen it on streaming or wherever it ends up dropping. Let me know what you thought of the movie. Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy it as much as maybe The Orient Express? Do you want to get more movies like this, or is this sort of a reminder of why we just don't make movies like this anymore? And did you love that mustache as much as I love that mustache? Let me know in the comment section. We'd love to talk to you about that. I encourage you guys, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, like the video. Got a lot of stuff coming up this year in the Collision. I'd love to have you just join with what we're doing here as we kind of wrestle with cultural issues and movies and just celebrate the good of culture. But thanks guys for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide through a world for Christ.